Your freezer is not full, it is overloaded with forgotten intentions. In Japan, calm kitchens are not built with bigger freezers. They are built by understanding exactly what belongs in one, exactly how long it belongs there, and exactly what to do with it before it quietly turns into waste you never notice until you are throwing away something that cost you $12 3 months ago and forgot you owned. Today, I am showing you 9 Japanese freezer habits that keep food fresh, eliminate waste, and save real money every single month. Habits that most people in other countries have simply never been taught. Not because they are complicated, because nobody ever sat down and explained the system that makes a freezer work the way it was always supposed to. And stay until habit 9, because I am giving you the simple Japanese freezer reset method, so you know exactly where to start tonight. Trust me. Habit 5 is something 90% of you are doing right now, and it is the single biggest reason your frozen food never quite tastes the way it should when you open it weeks later. And habit 8 is one almost nobody expects to find on a list about a freezer. Let us begin. Let us start with the habits that seem like common sense until Japan shows you what common sense actually looks like. These first 3 habits are quiet. They do not announce themselves. They cost nothing to change. But they are the foundation everything else is built on. And most people have never fully adopted even one of them. Habit 1, label everything before it goes in, not after, before. Open your freezer right now and look honestly at what is in there. The unlabeled zip bags, the container with frost on the lid you cannot see through, the thing wrapped in foil you are not fully sure about anymore, the bag that might be chicken and might be pork, and you are genuinely not certain which. We all do this. We tell ourselves we will remember. We put it in without writing anything down because we are in the middle of cleaning up after dinner and it will be fine and we will use it soon anyway. And then 6 weeks go by and the thing in the foil remains in the foil. And you keep moving it to the back to make space for the new things. And eventually, it is just part of the freezer in the way furniture becomes part of the room. You stop seeing it, but you are still paying for it. You paid for it at the store. You paid for the energy to keep it frozen. And the day you finally throw it away, you pay again. In the quiet, specific frustration of wasting something that once had real value. Here is how Japan sees this. In Japanese kitchen culture, there is a deep respect for the full life of food. Not just buying it well or cooking it well, storing it well, honoring it all the way through, and an unlabeled bag in the freezer is food that has already been partially abandoned. You bought it with intention, you cooked it with care, and then you put it away without giving it even 15 seconds of the attention it needed to survive its next chapter. A study published in the journal Waste Management found that households with consistent food labeling practices, contents and date written before storage, reduced frozen food waste by an average of 31% compared to households without this habit. Not because they bought less, because they used more of what they already had. The shift. Put a roll of freezer tape and a permanent marker beside the freezer tonight, not in a drawer across the kitchen, beside the freezer, where you cannot miss them, before anything goes in, before the lid is on, before the bag is sealed. Write the contents and the date every time, without exception. 2 pieces of information, contents, date, 15 seconds. That is the entire practice. And that small, consistent practice is the one that makes every other habit on this list possible. That is habit 1. Now let us open the door a little wider, because habit 2 is something most people think they are already doing, but almost never are doing correctly. Habit 2. Freeze in single portions from the start. You make a big batch of soup, a whole pot of it. You let it cool. You pour it all into one large container and put it in the freezer. That container will serve 4 people. But tonight, it is just you. Or just you and one other person. And now, 3 Tuesdays from now, you are defrosting an enormous container because you need 1 portion. Which means you are defrosting far more than you need. Which means you are either refreezing what you did not use, which degrades quality and is not recommended, or throwing the rest away. This cycle happens in almost every household that batch cooks. Not because the cooking was wrong, because the storage decision at the end of a long evening was made for convenience rather than function. In Japan, portion awareness is built into the cooking process itself, not as an afterthought, as the natural conclusion of making food you intend to fully use. Japanese bento culture, the deeply embedded practice of preparing individual balanced meals, is built on the understanding that food prepared for one person serves one person. That understanding carries through into everything, including how food goes into the freezer. A Japanese cook finishing a large pot of soup does not see one container to fill. They see 6 individual portions waiting to be labeled and stored. Research from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations found that portion-controlled freezing reduces total household food waste by up to 40% compared to bulk freezing in the same household. Not because the household is more disciplined, because the system makes waste the harder option rather than the easier one. Slow down here. Let this land. When your soup is in individual portions, using exactly what you need is the easy thing to do. When it is in one enormous container, you have to make a decision every single time about what to do with the rest. And most of the time, the rest does not get used. The shift. When something goes into the freezer in bulk, portion it before it freezes, not after. After is too late, the food is solid, and you have lost the opportunity. Before. Bags laid completely flat with 1 serving each. Containers with 1 meal each. Labeled, dated, ready. Dinner for 1 night takes 30 seconds longer to store, but it saves you from throwing away the equivalent of 1.5 meals for every batch you make. That is habit 2. Now let us talk about something that is actively happening in most freezers right now that most people have genuinely never thought about. Habit 3. Use the FIFO system. First in, first out. This is a habit used in every professional kitchen in Japan, without exception, and in most Japanese home kitchens. The concept is simple enough to teach a child. When something new goes into the freezer, the older item moves to the front. The newest item goes to the back. You always use what has been there the longest first. In most home freezers, the opposite happens. New things go in at the front because that is where the available space is. Older things get pushed to the back, and they stay there, quietly aging behind everything that arrived after them. Slowly losing quality, slowly losing their date in your memory. Until one day, you excavate the back of the freezer and find something wrapped in frost so thick you genuinely cannot identify the contents through the packaging. That object was purchased with real money. It was food that could have nourished someone. it is now waste. Not because of carelessness in the moment, because the system was never designed to prevent it. In Japanese kitchen philosophy, this connects to the concept of mottainai, the cultural understanding that wasting something of value is not just impractical, but carries a weight that goes beyond the dollar amount. Every piece of food that leaves a home as waste rather than as nourishment is a small grief in Japanese thinking. Not a dramatic one, a quiet, accumulated one that a different system would have prevented entirely. The shift. When you open the freezer today, spend 5 minutes reorganizing it. Oldest items at the front, newest at the back. Write the date clearly on every label. Every single time something new goes in, take the 5 extra seconds to move older items forward before the new one goes in behind them. 5 seconds per freezer trip. That is the entire practice. And it is the only thing standing between you and a freezer that works with you rather than against you. Now stay with me, because we are moving into the habits that change not just how you use your freezer, but how you fundamentally think about it. And habit 5 is the one I promised. The one 90% of you are doing right now, without knowing it is why your frozen food never quite tastes the way it should. But first, habit 4. Habit 4, cool food completely before freezing it. This one feels obvious until you think about how many times you have actually skipped it. You have had a long day. Dinner is done. You want to clean up and sit down and be finished with the kitchen. The leftover soup is still warm on the stove, and you put it straight into a container and into the freezer because you are tired and it will be fine. Here is what that warm food is doing inside your freezer while you are sitting on the couch. It is raising the temperature of everything around it. Your frozen vegetables, your portioned meals from earlier in the week, the ice cream. Every item in proximity to that warm container is temporarily warmer than it should be. Ice crystals within those items partially thaw. When the temperature drops again, they refreeze. This freeze and thaw cycle that you caused without knowing it is one of the primary causes of freezer burn and quality degradation in home freezers. It changes texture, it changes flavor, it affects food that was perfectly stored until you introduced a warm container beside it. The USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service specifically recommends that food be cooled to room temperature before freezing to protect not only the food being frozen, but the quality and safety of everything already in the freezer around it. In Japan, this step is treated as non-negotiable. Food does not go into the freezer warm any more than it would go onto the table uncooked. The cooling is part of the process. It is not optional, and it is not an afterthought. The shift. Let food cool to room temperature before it enters the freezer. If you are in a hurry, spread it across a wide, shallow container to cool faster. More surface area means faster heat release. Or set the container in a bowl of cold water for 10 minutes, then freeze. The extra 10 minutes protects everything already in that freezer. Your food that was already in there will thank you. And now, habit 5, the one I told you about at the beginning. Habit 5, freeze flat, always. Look at how things are currently stored in your freezer right now. Bags of soup standing upright, falling over, knocking against each other every time you open the door. Misshapen containers that cannot stack cleanly. A puzzle of incompatible shapes that means the freezer always looks full and chaotic, even when it technically has available space somewhere. The average person loses approximately 30% of their usable freezer space to poor bag and container shape alone, not to lack of space, to shape. Japanese freezer organization is built on one principle above almost all others. Flat is efficient. Flat means stackable. Flat means you can see everything at a single glance without removing anything. Flat means a full freezer is an organized freezer rather than an archaeological dig. Soups, stews, marinated meats, blanched vegetables, portioned grains, all of them go into zip bags and are laid completely flat to freeze. The bag is sealed with as much air removed as possible, laid on a tray or a flat surface inside the freezer and left until solid. Once frozen completely flat, they stand upright like books on a shelf or stack in neat, identical piles that use every cubic inch of available space with nothing wasted. A freezer organized this way uses dramatically less space and dramatically more of what it contains, because you can see and access every single item without pulling half the freezer out onto the counter to find what you are looking for. A study from the Swedish Environmental Research Institute found that households using organized, visible storage systems in freezers wasted 42% less food than those with unorganized, difficult-to-navigate freezers. The reason is simple. You do not use what you cannot see. You do not remember what you cannot easily find. Japan designed the freezer so that everything is always visible at a glance. Slow down here. Let this land. The shift. Every bag of liquid or soft food gets frozen flat from today forward. Lay the bag flat on a tray inside the freezer until it is completely solid. Then stand it up or stack it. Write the label on the wide, flat face of the bag before it goes flat so you can read it easily while it is stacked upright. One rule, one change, and your freezer will never look or function the same way again. That is habit 5. Habit 6, know your freezer times and actually use them. Everything has a freezer life, not an infinite one, a specific one. And most people have never once been told what those times actually are. Cooked meat and poultry, 2 to 6 months. Raw ground meat, 3 to 4 months. Whole cuts of raw beef, pork, or lamb, 4 to 12 months. Fish and seafood, 2 to 6 months depending on variety. Soups and stews, 2 to 3 months. Cooked grains like rice, 1 to 2 months. Bread and baked goods, 2 to 3 months. Butter, 6 to 9 months. Most vegetables properly blanched before freezing, 8 to 12 months. Fruit, 8 to 12 months. Dairy-based dishes, 1 to 2 months. These are the ranges from the United States Department of Agriculture's official food safety guidelines. Food kept beyond these windows remains technically safe to eat if kept continuously frozen without interruption. But quality degrades significantly past these points. Texture changes in ways that cooking cannot reverse. Flavor fades past the point where seasoning can restore it. The food you are defrosting no longer represents the food you put in, and you will taste the difference every time. In Japan, the freezer is not a museum. It is not a long-term preservation system for things you might use someday when the right moment arrives. It is an active tool in a working kitchen. Items enter it with a purpose and a timeline. They are used within that timeline. They leave the freezer to become a meal rather than to become waste at the back of a drawer you stopped opening, the shift. When you write the label, contents and date, add one more piece of information, the use by date, not the freezing date, the date by which you plan to have used it, based on the guidelines above. When you open the freezer for your weekly check, you are not looking at a collection of things you stored at some point. You are looking at a schedule. Food that needs to move this week is visible at the front. Food that has weeks to go is behind it. That is a fundamentally different relationship with a freezer than most people have ever had. And it takes about 8 extra seconds per item to create. Habit 7. Blanch vegetables before freezing them. This is the Japanese habit that most home cooks outside Japan skip entirely. Not because they are lazy, because nobody told them it exists, and nobody explained what happens to a vegetable when you freeze it without blanching it first. Blanching is the process of submerging vegetables briefly in rapidly boiling water and then immediately transferring them into a bowl of ice water to stop the cooking process completely. The time in the boiling water varies by vegetable. Spinach and leafy greens, 30 to 60 seconds. Broccoli and cauliflower, 3 minutes. Green beans and asparagus, 2 to 3 minutes. Corn cut from the cob, 4 minutes. The timing is precise and it matters. Here is what blanching is actually doing inside the vegetable and why it changes everything about what you pull out of the freezer months later. Vegetables contain enzymes that are naturally active and continue to function even at freezer temperatures. These enzymes, peroxidase and catalase most significantly, break down color, flavor, texture, and nutritional content over time. They do not stop working when the temperature drops. They slow, but they continue. An unblanched vegetable frozen today is a vegetable that is actively degrading inside your freezer at a slow but continuous rate. Blanching deactivates those enzymes permanently. A blanched vegetable frozen today will produce the same color, taste, and nutritional value 6 months from now that it had the day you froze it. An unblanched vegetable frozen today begins losing quality almost immediately. Research from the University of Illinois Extension found that blanched frozen vegetables retained up to 60% more of their original nutrients after 6 months of freezing compared to unblanched vegetables frozen for the same period. Not a marginal difference. 60% more nutrition. From 5 minutes of preparation that most people have never been told to do. In Japan, where the quality of ingredients is inseparable from the respect shown to the people being fed, blanching before freezing is not an advanced technique for serious cooks. It is simply what you do, the same way you would not serve rice uncooked. You do not freeze vegetables without blanching them first. The shift. The next time you buy a large bunch of spinach, broccoli, green beans, snap peas, or any vegetable you plan to freeze, blanch it first. Boiling water, ice bath, dry completely, freeze flat. The time cost is under 6 minutes. The difference in quality and nutrition when you open that bag 3 months from now is significant, and once you taste the difference, you will never go back. Habit 8. The freezer meal habit. Cook once, eat 3 times. This is the habit most people would not expect to find in a video about a freezer. It is not about storage technique. It is about the philosophy of what the freezer is actually for. In Japan, the concept of ichiju sansai, 1 soup and 3 dishes as the foundation of a balanced meal, shapes how Japanese cooks think about preparing food in advance. A large pot of miso soup base made on Sunday does not just feed Sunday dinner. Portioned into individual containers, labeled, and frozen flat, it feeds Tuesday lunch and Thursday evening without any additional cooking. A batch of seasoned ground meat cooked once becomes 3 separate meals across the week. A double portion of rice cooked tonight is breakfast tomorrow and the foundation of something completely different on Wednesday. The freezer in the system is not where you store the leftovers you did not get around to eating. That is reactive. This is intentional. The freezer is where you stage the future. You cook once with the explicit understanding that you are preparing for Tuesday and Thursday and next Sunday, not just for tonight. The distinction matters more than it sounds. When you cook leftovers into the freezer reactively, you are saving something that already happened. When you cook with the freezer in mind from the start, you are building future ease deliberately. You are giving your Wednesday evening self a gift before your Wednesday evening self even exists. Research from the Food Marketing Institute found that households using intentional batch cooking with freezer staging reduced weekly food spending by an average of 22% compared to households cooking from scratch each night. Not because they bought less food, because they wasted less and duplicated shopping trips less often. The freezer made the grocery store necessary less frequently. The shift. Once a week, cook one item with the explicit intention of freezing half of it, not the leftovers, half, before dinner is served, portioned, labeled, frozen flat before you sit down to eat. That container you are putting in the freezer tonight is Tuesday evening already handled. Wednesday already lighter. One less decision, one less trip to the store, one less question of what to make when you are tired and hungry and have nothing ready. The freezer is not where cooking ends. In Japanese kitchen thinking, it is where tomorrow's cooking begins. And now, habit 9, the last one, the one that holds every other habit in place and keeps the whole system running without ever requiring you to think about it. Habit 9, the weekly freezer review. Once a week, 9 minutes. Before you go grocery shopping, take everything out of the front section of the freezer you can reach easily. Check the dates you wrote. Move items according to FIFO. Look at the use-by dates. Note anything that needs to be used this week and write it somewhere visible before you close the freezer door. The refrigerator door, your meal plan, a note on your phone, somewhere you will actually see it. Then go shopping. And do not buy what you already have. This is the habit that connects everything. The labels you wrote make this possible in 9 minutes instead of 45. The flat bags make everything visible at a glance instead of hidden behind other things. The FIFO system makes the review fast because things are already in the right order. The use-by dates you wrote make this informative and confident rather than guesswork and anxiety. In Japanese kitchen philosophy, the weekly check is not a cleaning task or a chore category. It is the practice that keeps the kitchen honest with itself. It is the moment you sit with your food and ask, what is here? What needs to be honored this week? And what would I be buying unnecessarily if I walked into a grocery store right now without knowing that it was already here waiting for me? Most households without this habit buy food they already own at least once a week. A bag of spinach, a portion of chicken, a container of broth, already in the freezer, already paid for, bought again because the freezer was not checked before the shopping list was made. The weekly review eliminates that category of spending entirely. The shift. Choose a day. Make it the day before your main grocery shop. Set a 9-minute timer. Open the freezer. Do the check. Move things forward. Note what needs to be used. Close it. Then shop. Every single week. Without exception. That is habit 9. And it is the one that makes the other 8 permanent rather than temporary. 9 habits, every single one of them free. Every single one of them possible to begin tonight. Label before it goes in. Portion before you store it. First in, first out, every time. Cool completely before it enters the freezer. Freeze flat, know your times, and write them on the label. Blanch your vegetables. Cook once and freeze half deliberately. Check the freezer once a week before you shop. As promised, here is the Japanese freezer reset test. 2 steps, under 5 minutes. This tells you exactly where to start. Step 1, the visibility audit. Open your freezer right now. Without moving anything, look at what you can see and identify from where you are standing. Count how many items you can name without touching anything. Count how many you know the date of. Count how many you could not confidently name the contents of without opening them. Every item in that third category is an item the system has already partially lost. Those are the ones you address first. Step 2, the threshold question. For every item you pull forward and look at, ask one honest question. If I had bought this at the store today, would I be genuinely glad to cook it this week? If the answer is clearly yes, it stays at the front where you will use it. If the answer is no, or maybe, or I am really not sure anymore, it does not go back in. It goes into this week's meals, or it leaves the freezer today. Not back into the freezer. Out of it. Make the decision now rather than moving the same uncertainty to the back of the shelf for another month. Start with one shelf tonight. Not the whole freezer, not a full reorganization. One shelf. Because a freezer that works for you is not one that has more in it. It is one where everything inside has a name, a date, a purpose, and a plan. You do not need a bigger freezer. You need a better relationship with the one you already have. Look at your freezer right now. Honestly, what is in there that has been in there for longer than you care to admit? Tell me in the comments below. 1 through 9. Which of these 9 habits are you starting with tonight? And if this opened your eyes to something you have been quietly ignoring every time you open that freezer door, share it with one person in your life who throws away more food than they would ever want to admit out loud. They may be 9 habits away from never wasting a meal again. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.